Welcome to the deep dive. Let's face it, if you've ever bought clothes online, you've probably experienced the sizing saga.
Oh, absolutely.
That moment of hope, and then the hassle of returns because a medium feels like a completely different animal depending on the brand.
Or even within the same brand? It's wild.
Yeah. We're talking about return rates soaring, sometimes as high as 40% in online fashion. And a huge chunk of that, it's down to fit. It's just this frustrating loop for us as shoppers, and honestly, a really costly one for the companies we're buying from.
It really is. And the way we currently handle sizing online, well, it has some pretty fundamental flaws.
Like what?
Well, those letter sizes, S, M, L,
Yeah.
they're really just symbols, aren't they? There's no universal standard.
Right.
As the research we're looking at highlights, you just can't rely on them for consistent sizing.
From the size guide.
Yeah, the size guides. They're meant to help, obviously, but they often don't account for, the specific way a garment is cut or the feel of the fabric.
And who actually pulls out a measuring tape every single time?
Exactly. Nobody wants to do that. Plus, you've got this whole idea of vanity sizing,
Ah, yes, where things are labeled smaller than they actually are.
which just throws another wrench in the works.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the size information we usually get online, it just isn't cutting it for making confident choices.
Right. So we all know the problem. It's very familiar. But what if there was a way to tap into this massive, almost untapped source of info that could make online sizing, way better?
Okay, interesting.
That's exactly what researchers at Flipkart were thinking. They wrote this paper, incorporating customer reviews in size and fit recommendation systems for fashion e-commerce.
Ah, okay. Using the reviews.
Exactly. So our mission today is to unpack their approach using customer reviews as a key, really, to unlock more accurate size and fit recommendations. We're going to dig into how they're trying to make your next online clothing purchase, hopefully, a much smoother experience.
It sounds promising because this research really zeroes in on that major pain point, the size-related returns.
Yeah.
It's far more than just a slight inconvenience for shoppers. It has a huge impact on the bottom line for these online fashion retailers.
For sure.
So getting accurate size and fit recommendations right is critical. I mean, for several reasons.
The most obvious being fewer returns, I assume?
That's the big one, yeah. Reducing the sheer volume of returns.
Yeah.
But beyond that, it drastically improves the customer experience, makes people happier.
Makes sense. If you trust it'll fit.
You're more likely to buy in the first place, right? So that boosts conversions. And ultimately, you build more loyalty. People come back.
Now, the paper points out that the current ways of tackling this, well, they have their limits. Early on, a lot of the focus was on past purchases, but that kind of hits a wall when you've got new customers or brand new items.
The cold start problem.
Yeah.
No data yet.
Exactly. And even the more advanced deep learning methods, the ones that look at product details and customer characteristics, they haven't completely solved the puzzle either. So what's been missing?
Well, precisely. While these newer methods, the ones considering, say, the garment's listed size, the brand, the fabric, and some general customer info, while they're a step forward, they often overlook this really rich source of insights. What customers are actually saying in their own words, in the reviews. Think about it. When someone sends an item back because of the size, they very often mention it.
Right. This runs small or way too big.
Exactly. Or even more specific feedback like the sleeves were too tight or too baggy in the waist. This kind of detailed sort of qualitative feedback is incredibly valuable.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. Forget just looking at product specs. The Flipkart researchers came up with a way to actively bring in what customers are saying in their reviews, specifically about how things fit.
Exactly. See, previous attempts to use reviews for fit often just tried to broadly categorize them, like, does this item tend to run small or large overall?
Kind of a general vibe.
Yeah, a general vibe. But this new approach aims for something much more precise. The goal isn't just a general sense of a product sizing trend.
It's more personalized.
It's using the specific language in those reviews to help recommend the right size for you as an individual customer, moving beyond just observation to actual recommendation.
All right, so how do you actually take all that, unstructured text from reviews and turn it into something useful for a recommendation engine? That sounds like some pretty advanced tech is needed.
It is, yeah. At its core, their method uses deep learning,
Okay.
which is really good at sifting through massive amounts of information, finding complex patterns. They've designed a system that looks at 3 different types of information.
3 types.
Yep. First, the product itself, things like the listed size, the brand, the material. Second, it looks at information about the customer.
Right.
And the really innovative part is the third piece. It also looks at what customers have written in their reviews.
So for the product details and customer info, how does that get translated? How does the system understand brand X or cotton?
Good question. So for things like measurements, if they have them, those are usually standardized, normalized. For things like brand names or fabric types, categorical stuff, the system converts them into numerical representations. They're called embeddings.
Embeddings, like secret codes?
Kind of, yeah. Think of them like learned codes. Each brand gets its own unique code, and maybe brands that are similar in style might get codes that are numerically closer. It lets the system understand these relationships.
Okay.
So these coded features for both product and customer get fed into the system.
Got it. Now, let's dig into the review part. This feels like the real game changer. How do you take all those different opinions, all that text, and distill it?
Yeah, this is where things like pre-trained language models come in. Models like BERT.
BERT.
Yeah, you can imagine BERT has read like a huge chunk of the internet. So it understands how words are used in different contexts. When it sees too small in a review, it doesn't just see two words. It understands the meaning of that phrase, especially in relation to clothing size.
And turns that meaning into numbers.
Exactly. It translates this understanding into a set of numbers that embedding, again, that the recommendation system can work with. So each review gets processed, turning the text into a numerical representation that captures its meaning about size and fit.
But what happens when a product has, like, hundreds of reviews? Does it analyze every single one every time I look at the page?
Not exactly. For a particular product, they take the numerical representations, the embeddings of all its reviews, and they average them together.
Okay, so like a summary score.
Pretty much. It creates a single summary that represents the overall feedback on how that product fits based on all the reviews. If a product doesn't have reviews yet, they use a sort of placeholder value.
And that average review summary gets used?
Yep, that's fed into the system along with the product and customer info.
Okay, so now I've got these three streams: product details, customer info, and the summarized review feedback, all in a numerical format the computer understands. How does it combine all that to actually make a recommendation, like buy this size?
Right. So the numerical representations from all three streams are combined and then fed into another part of the system, which also uses deep learning. This part learns how to weigh the information from each source. How important is the brand versus what the reviews say for this customer looking at this product?
And the output?
The output is basically a prediction, a likelihood of whether this specific product will fit small, just right, fit, or large for that specific customer.
And that becomes the recommendation.
Exactly. That then gets translated into those helpful little suggestions you sometimes see online, like you might want to order one size up, or this tends to run true to size.
That's a really clear breakdown, thanks. Now, okay, it's one thing to design this system, but the proof is in the pudding, right? Did the researchers actually test this out in the real world on Flipkart's site?
They did, yeah. And pretty rigorously, too. They ran a lot of tests using real data from Flipkart.
What kind of clothes?
They looked across 4 popular categories: women's jackets, women's Curtis and Curtis, men's jeans, and men's polo t-shirts. So a decent mix.
And they compared it to what? The old way?
Yeah, essentially, yes. They compared how well their new method, the one including reviews, performed against the standard approach, a baseline model they called SFNet, which only used the product and customer information without looking at the reviews.
Okay, the moment of truth. What did they find? Did adding the reviews actually make a difference? A significant one?
Absolutely. The results showed a consistent and, importantly, statistically significant improvement in prediction accuracy when they included the customer reviews.
How much improvement?
Well, they measured it using something called the F1 macro score, which is a standard way to measure this kind of prediction accuracy. The improvement ranged from about 1.37% up to 4.31% across those different clothing categories.
1 to 4%. That maybe doesn't sound massive.
You might think that, but in the world of online shopping, with millions and millions of transactions.
Right, scale matters.
Exactly. Even a 1% reduction in returns can mean millions of dollars saved for a big retailer. And think about customer happiness. That boost is significant too. Fewer frustrated customers, more repeat business.
Good point. The paper also mentioned they experimented with different ways of training the language model, the part that reads the reviews. Why does that matter?
That's a great point. How you train that language model really impacts how well it understands the nuances, the subtleties of language related to fit.
So what did they try?
They tried a few things. First, they used a public data set of fashion reviews, one called ModCloth, to sort of give the language model some initial training.
Transfer learning, right?
Exactly, transfer learning. And that actually showed some improvement, which is promising. It suggests that even if a company doesn't have tons of its own review data yet, leveraging general fashion feedback can still help.
Okay, what else?
Second, they trained a model specifically using Flipkart's own customer reviews, where they'd actually labeled the reviews beforehand as indicating small, fit, or large.
Using their own data worked better.
It did work better, yes. Which makes sense. It highlights the advantage of using data that's specific to your platform, your products, how your customers talk about fit.
So what gave the absolute best results?
The peak performance came from a two-step process. First, they pre-trained a language model on just a massive amount of general text from the internet.
Give it a broad understanding of language first.
Right. Then, they fine-tuned it specifically on the task of understanding fit-related language, using Flipkart's own labeled review data.
So general knowledge plus specific fine-tuning.
That seemed to be the winning combo.
Yeah.
It suggests having both that broad language understanding and a specific grasp of fit terminology is most effective.
Interesting.
Oh, and another important thing they found, just using the reviews by themselves without the product and customer info. That actually wasn't very effective for predicting fit.
Ah, so you need all three pieces.
Exactly. It really emphasizes that you need to combine all three sources, product, customer, and reviews, to get the best, most accurate predictions. One piece alone isn't enough.
Okay, so for you listening right now, maybe you're someone who shops for clothes online all the time, or maybe you even work in e-commerce. What are the big takeaways here? What should people remember from this research?
Well, there's several key things, I think. First, it's clear that online fashion retailers are really actively working on this. They're trying to find better ways to help you choose the right size. It's a genuine challenge they're investing in solving.
They're trying.
Second, this research provides pretty strong evidence that your customer reviews, they aren't just random opinions floating out there. They're actually a super valuable source of information.
They matter.
They really do. They can significantly improve how accurate size recommendations are. Third, these advanced AI tools, deep learning, natural language processing, they're playing a bigger and bigger role in tackling these kinds of everyday problems, like figuring out if that jacket will actually fit you.
Yeah.
And maybe the most interesting takeaway for you as a shopper, even if you haven't, manually entered your measurements anywhere.
Right.
The reviews you leave about whether something fit or not, they're contributing to this richer pool of data. That data helps make sizing better for future shoppers.
Yeah.
And potentially for your own future purchases, too.
Huh. So my complaining about those jeans being too tight might actually help someone else down the line.
It very well might.
So bringing it all together, it sounds like this research offers a really promising path forward, tackling that ongoing frustration of online fashion sizing.
Yeah.
By harnessing the collective wisdom, basically, that's hidden in all those customer reviews, we could be heading towards maybe a future with fewer return, a more enjoyable online shopping experience.
That's the hope, exactly. It really underscores the potential of using data in smart ways that were maybe underutilized before. And it prompts an interesting thought maybe for you listening. If customer reviews focusing just on size and fit can be this impactful, think about the possibilities of other kinds of customer feedback.
Oh, like what?
Well, the researchers themselves mentioned looking at things like customer-uploaded photos.
Ah, seeing it on a real person.
Right. Or the questions and answers sections on product pages. Those could be future work. How might those additional pieces of the puzzle, further transform the online shopping experience, make it even more personalized?
That's a great question to ponder.
It really is. It's exciting to consider the continued progress and just the innovative ways AI can address these seemingly simple, yet often incredibly frustrating everyday challenges, like finding the perfect fit online.